Welcome to episode 21 of the Ikario podcast. Today, I bring you a conversation with Abby. Abby is one of the Ikario team members. He is our marketing and business guy. And I wanted to do this episode with him because we've just had many conversations that were just great conversations, off the record. We'll just have a call and it ends up going for an hour or 90 minutes. And at the end of it, I think, man, I wish we had recorded this. There was some really good stuff here. There was some really valuable stuff here that I would love to share with people. And so the attempt here was, let's see if we can have one of these discussions on air. And the thing is, I think Abby is just really good at asking questions because I think, as you'll see, most of the time it's me talking, and I hope you don't mind, right? I hope you don't mind listening to like extended rants by yours truly. But I think Abby just has a really good way of asking poignant questions that, I don't know, they just hit the nail on the head. And it ends up just being, like I said, even if it's mostly me talking, I look back at it and go, wow, that was good. Somehow, if I had just stood here in front of the microphone, I wouldn't have produced anything nearly as interesting as this. The topic of this podcast is basically goal achievement. Everything involved in reaching your goals, even distant goals, so even like really big life goals, even very ambitious goals. This is the thing that Abby asks me about and that we discuss. And we talk about this to a large extent in a business context. So he asks me a lot about my experience building my first businesses. And like I said, he's our marketing and business guy, so that's kind of where his mind is at. But also we talk about other forms of achievement and things like athletic performance, and also just the principles and the philosophy that I've picked up along the way of like all the learning I've done and all the things that I've done, like going through the hardships of building a business and going through the hardships of turning my life around the way I have. This conversation, I think, does a great job of extracting useful advice and practical advice out of that life experience. So I enjoyed this conversation a lot, and I hope you enjoy it too and get a lot of value out of it. You can find show notes for this episode as well as any links and anything else related to what we do by going to ikario.com/021 for episode 21. And with that, let's jump right into the conversation with Abby.
The first question that I've been dying to ask you is, I want to know from your perspective, what's your take on process orientation and outcome independence?
Okay, well, yeah.
If you want to,
yeah, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
For sure. So what I was thinking was, from a business owner perspective, right? Now, how do you simultaneously keep the end goal in mind while knowing that if I focus too much on the end goal, I'll be detracted from the process.
Right, yeah.
And at some point, because to me it seems paradoxical, and at some point you must want the outcome so bad, or the process. So how do you keep yourself engaged in the day-to-day grind, and how do you keep yourself going, basically?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that I imagine that probably most startup entrepreneurs probably have something like this, where they find some way to essentially make that connection between the process and the outcome, right? Because like you say, it is otherwise kind of paradoxical or something, where if you focus only on the outcome, that can be really bad for your ability to stick it out and show up every day and do what needs to be done. And especially the problem is that you usually have to put in a lot of work over a long time before the payoff comes. And if you're only dreaming of an end goal, it's not great for goal achievement, because you're constantly frustrated by your lack of apparent progress, right? And on the other hand, if you're only process oriented, if you're like totally zen in the moment, that's really good for showing up every day and doing the thing, but the risk is that you end up kind of going around in circles, or it's like not doing the right things, right? And I think that this is probably one of those things that I bet every startup entrepreneur has made it through, has found some way has like their own little mental strategy or something to connect these two. And in my case, I think it is like, as you know, I talk a lot about skill building. And for me, that is one of the ways in which I like connect these two things, right? Where if I can say, okay, I have this goal, I want to build this business, and that's the goal, and it's clear that I need to get there, and it's far away. And the step by step on the way there is skill building. So I think of it in terms of, what do I need to get good at in order to be able to build this business that I want, right? And then that helps me be motivated for the step-by-step process, because my thinking is essentially, if I'm doing things that are making me better at the skills I need in order to achieve that goal, then even if this specific thing doesn't work out, I'm still doing something useful. So in other words, like, and in fact, a very real example from my life with this is that when I started software development, my stretch goal was to create an email marketing service. And at the time, the email marketing systems available, Aweber was very popular, MailChimp was already rising in popularity. They were all a bit rubbish, basically, or they were just not, you couldn't really do any advanced email marketing with them. And on the other side, you had like super expensive solutions like Infusionsoft, where you could do more advanced stuff, but they were super clunky and extremely expensive. And I looked at that and I was like, there's an opportunity here. You can make a more like startup friendly, pricing wise and feature wise and user, you can make an advanced email marketing tool that has a user interface and pricing that is accessible for, startups, content creators, and so on. But it was clear to me that I had zero experience with software development at that point. And also, just like in terms of, it was clear to me this is a project that can only be done with a team. I had no experience running a team. This requires just experience in like software development, stuff like that. I didn't have that either. So I could see that if I had started trying to build a email marketing system right then, that would have been a failure for sure. But so I thought, okay, I'm going to start by developing smaller software products to kind of cut my teeth on some simpler things like, some small WordPress plugin or whatever. And if I do that for a while, I get better at software development to the point where I can then get to the point where I can say, okay, now I can build this system. I can build an email marketing system. And that was kind of my distant goal. Now, so that's what I did. I started with smaller software development projects, but by the time I got to the point where I could say, okay, now I probably would have the skills to build an email marketing system, the opportunity had already been taken by other players in the market, right? So most famously, probably ConvertKit. They're probably exactly what I wanted to build, And so that opportunity, I was too late for that opportunity, but it's actually fine. And this is kind of my point, right? The entire time I was working towards this distant goal, I could keep myself motivated because I was like, look, the kind of the worst case scenario is that I get better at building a software business. And even if I don't end up building this software business that I'm dreaming of right now, that's still useful, right? And that's exactly what ended up happening. I mean, we ended up building Thrive Themes, which is a software business, which is, very profitable. Everything's good. Like, there's nothing, I don't feel like it's a real loss that I didn't end up building the thing that I was originally aiming for.
Okay, thank you for that. That was a great answer. And that actually perfectly leads me into a philosophical question I had for you. So one of my favorite things that I've ever heard you say is the concept of being a better sailor. Mm-hmm. That people are waiting for calmer seas and they're essentially looking for guarantees in life or some form of certainty. Now, the way you just described your journey, like using the little image of being a sailor, Shane in the little boat, sailing towards email marketing system island. Mm-hmm. Now, how was that experience like for you? Because what I'm gathering is even your milestones are not like, okay, we'll make 10K per month at some point. The ones are like, now me and my team are much better at creating software plugins, and now we're skilled in this, we're skilled in that. So two parts of this question. So one is like, what was your experience like being that sailor? And the second one would be dealing with this uncertainty. Like, what would be your advice to, people listening, aspiring entrepreneurs?
So first of all, let me quickly explain the sailor analogy, because I don't think we've actually publicly talked about this yet, or I'm not sure. But anyway, I think this is worth briefly elaborating on that. So the idea is that, indeed, I see a lot of people essentially wishing for calm seas. So they think my life would be good if only the seas were calm. And there's kind of two ways to think about this. It's either people are in the harbor and they're not sailing out because they're saying, I'm waiting for calm waters. Once calm waters come, then I'm going to do the thing, right? And they wait in the harbor forever. Another way to think of it is that people are already out sailing and they're constantly complaining. They're like, the reason I'm unhappy, the reason my life is bad is because of this storm, because of these waves. And I'm basically waiting and I'm fantasizing about some point in the future where the seas are just going to be calm and I'm finally going to be at peace. And the reality is it's not going to happen. I mean, it's going to happen for brief periods, right? You'll have brief periods of calm seas and so on. But for the rest of your life, there's always going to be storms and waves and unexpected things and hard weather, basically, right? And so the idea of this analogy is that the calm and the peace and the safety that you seek doesn't come from calm seas. It comes from being a really good sailor. Because you can be such a good sailor that you're not bothered by the storm, that you're not bothered by harsh conditions out on the sea, because you can just handle it. And in fact, you can get so good at it that most of this is fun for you, right? That you'd be slightly bored when it's calm. And you're like, I'd rather wrestle the winds a bit, So that's the idea also of skill building in terms of, and in fact, more specifically, I think of this as problem solving. I think it's not very inaccurate to say that life is essentially a series of problems that you have to solve. And so the better you are at problem solving and the more you enjoy problem solving, the better your overall life quality is going to be, right? It's just such a huge upgrade to your life quality if you are good at and get some enjoyment out of solving problems. And that's kind of that's the equivalent of just being an excellent sailor. And you're just like, bring on the waves, bring on the storm. This is fun. I'm good at this. That's the analogy, right? And that connects to what we've been talking about here. So, all right, having explained that, the first question is what was the experience like of building that, or what?
Yeah, because
go ahead.
So I was going to say it's very easy to look at someone like you now and say, oh, well, you had so much going for you. It was obviously easier for you. So I want to understand what the experience was like. I doubt that rarely is ever the truth.
Yeah. So, I mean, the experience is, it's hard. Often it's very hard, right? I mean, we had incredibly hard times, and we did crazy stuff in building Thrive themes. And it's one of those things where so there is kind of a before and after here, in the sense that when we were building Thrive themes, and that was initially primarily Paul and myself. So Paul is my business partner and co-founder. And we've worked together for like 8 or 9 years now. And so when we started basically from zero with this, and at the time we were in a position where it's like, okay, if we can't make this work, that's going to become a problem pretty quickly. Because at the time, we didn't have much money saved up. We didn't have other income sources. Like I had some income sources from earlier on, but basically by the time I started building software, most of those had dried up. So yeah, we were basically like, okay, we have to make this work somehow, And there is a difference there where, in a way, I think that's also something that does keep you in the game. It keeps you in the game where you're like, you make progress. And I also need to say, right, the way we built the business, it's not the kind of Silicon Valley startup style where you build some business that just loses money hand over fist, and you hope that you get bailed out by some big company. And you basically you're scrambling towards that one success, right? It's nothing like that. What we did is we started lean so that we would, build some small product, some first version of a small product, and sell that and make some money, and then improve it and do more marketing to make more money and so on, right? So we were making money, but still. So then you're earning a living doing this thing, and eventually you're earning a fairly decent living. But the experience in the moment was often that it's just unbelievable how hard this is. And we had many long periods of like sleepless nights and overworking and all this kind of stuff. And also just like this kind of, you sometimes feel like you're just being beaten down by life. It's like the moment you have you've just barely broken even. Like this is the first time you're not worried about money. And then, your server crashes and you lose something, or just some massive thing happens, where just as you thought you could take a breather, something horrible happens, and you end up spending, weeks stressed out of your mind trying to solve some problem. We had a lot of that, we definitely had a lot of that. But at the same time, just like I can tell you all kinds of war stories of, all the incredibly difficult shit we went through, we also had a really good time. And it really is, so it really is both of those things, right? Again, if you think of the sailor, if you have a sailor who's out on the sea and is not resisting it, is saying, okay, we're going to do this, right? And you have the success, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this storm. But then also, as you grapple with it, you get into that mode of, we're actually doing this. This is actually kind of cool, right? And then every once in a while, you do have calmer seas for a short period, and you're like, damn, this is actually really good. And when you're out there, you don't wish that you were back in the harbor. At least that was my experience, right? Even when things get super hard, I was never like, oh, I wish I had a job. I was always like, no, okay, this sucks super hard, but this is what I want to be doing, and this is what I want to be getting better at. But also there, I think that the focus on skills really helps, because it's like, for me at least, it's always been this thing of like trusting the process. And there are certain things, and I've chosen my battles in such a way that I can basically trust the process. Because like, let me also give it like as a comparison. Actually, here's a great comparison. Like before, in my life before entrepreneurship, martial arts was a huge thing for me at one point, right? So for about 15 years of my life, I practiced all kinds of martial arts, and that was my main focus. And obviously one of the options that was kind of open to me was, should I start like my own dojo? Should I start my own school where I train people? That could have been a life path for me, and a possible, like, how I make a living, right? And contrast that, think about, okay, you can decide to open your own school and teach martial arts, and that's how you make a living. Or you could try to, compete in MMA or something and make a living like that. And those are two very different things, in the sense that if you compete in MMA, then you know that the only way to make an even halfway decent living at this is you have to be one of the best in the world. You have to be in like the top 1% of the entire world before you can make any income of, any considerable income from this. And it's really only the real top superstars that for whom this is lucrative. And a problem there is, like, no matter how passionate I am about martial arts, no matter how hard I train, it's pretty unlikely that I would ever get into that top tier, It's like, because just genetics, I'm probably genetically excluded from that tier right away. Like if I see some of these combatants, like the kinds of hits they take, I'm pretty sure that I would snap in half if you kick me like that, And it's nothing to do with my willpower or how hard I train. I'm just gonna break if someone hits me that hard, Genetically, I don't think I'm made like that. I don't think I can have someone like elbow me in the face for half an hour, and be okay. I don't think I'm made like that, And the reason I'm saying that is that because here, if I was trying to succeed as a professional fighter, I wouldn't feel like I can trust the process. I would feel like, yes, I can try and I can train super hard and I can be super disciplined and so on. But it would be about finding out, do I even have the potential to play here? And in my case, I'm pretty sure the answer is no. And that's different from if I choose to start a martial arts school and earn my living that way. There, I can trust the process. I can say, look, if I make the right moves, if I choose a decent location, I manage my money well, I do good marketing, I make sure that I have a good program for people, right? I'm sure that I can follow this process and eventually make this work. Why? Because there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of successful martial arts schools. And you don't have to be in the top 1%. You don't have to be genetically gifted. You don't have to be an outlier to win at this. That doesn't mean it's easy. I think it's probably pretty damn hard actually to really succeed with something like this. It's certainly not a case of just opening a school and then just money starts pouring in. No, I'm sure that there's a lot of hardship people go through going from zero to a successful martial arts school. But it's the kind of thing where I think I would feel like I can get through the grind, I can get through the hard times because I know, like I can basically, I can do the numbers essentially. I can look at where is my school located, what's the demographic within like reach of this school, how many people can I potentially reach, and I can keep trying new things. I can keep trying new marketing methods. I can keep doing more things and putting in the work, and I can trust that eventually that will bring a return. And so that is what I think of as, on the one hand, you can be in a superstar business or in a superstar game, which I would avoid. And on the other hand, you can be in this kind of thing where, yes, it might be hard, but you can trust the process. That's always what I've sought out. And that's how I also felt with building Thrive themes. Even though there was a lot of unknowns there, I always felt like clearly other people are doing this, right? I can see people selling WordPress plugins and making lots of money. And some of these plugins aren't even that good. And I'm like, okay, I can get to the point where I can make a product like this. I can get to the point where I can do marketing that's as good or better than theirs. And I can trust the process. That's what I mean.
Wow, thank you for that. That was actually amazing. Two things that came to mind. I'll bring up the first one. So you were mentioning how becoming a superstar, you have equated it to, in my mind, to being like a high-paying actor. Like there's literally millions for the one that actually makes it, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So, okay, so that's one reason. So you're kind of playing the law of averages here, or looking at the highest probable thing. What is my highest probable chance of success? So I'm going to pursue that.
Yeah. And also with the actor example, right? So with the athlete example, there's like genetic limitations. With the actor example, it's like, look, you know that the best actors in the world aren't the ones on screen, right? For sure there are, first of all, some of them aren't that great as actors. But and I'm sure there's on some stage somewhere, some guy you've never heard about, some girl you've never heard about, and they're bloody amazing. And so there's not a direct correlation between the skill of acting and the success as an actor. And it probably has way more to do with like networking, knowing the right people and so on. And then, okay, acknowledging that I'm playing a networking game just as much as I'm learning to be a good actor is one step, and you can see, well, can I play that networking game? But even there, I think that it's just such a huge factor is luck to get, and the problem is, so that the reason I would avoid that is because it's not in my control, right? I can't just build the skill to the level that I need, essentially. I also need luck, or I also need stuff that are just outside of my control, right? And so that's what I would avoid.
Okay, that's perfectly fair. It just reminds me of The Prince by Machiavelli. Like in his book, he says, 50% is what you can control. The other 50% is luck. So you're opting for something where, I guess, luck is less than 50% of a factor.
Yeah, ideally, yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. And the other thing I want to, like, I guess for people who are listening and not actually seeing the video, when you were talking about the sailor analogy and how the seas were, like, you were actually lighting up. You're like, oh man, and we went through this, and it was hard, but it was actually fun, right?
Yeah.
So I want to confirm a cliche Instagram quote with you.
Oh no.
Which is, it's not about the destination. It's about the person you become. It's about the journey.
Oh,
How
no.
much truth is there in that?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think there can be truth in that. Yeah, sure, there can be truth in that. It's like, but at the same time, so at the same time, I do want to like maybe re-emphasize something I mentioned before, which is like the wins along the way. So it is also about the results, and I think that's also, again, that's where this kind of, let's say, the dichotomy or the conflict between goal-oriented and process-oriented comes in. If we were going through all this hardship and we made a product and then nobody buys it, and we try to do better marketing and nobody buys it, it's like that's also a sign that maybe we're doing something wrong, right? Because what we're trying to do is we are trying to get those wins where we say, okay, this is on a very small scale, this is a success, and then how can we get more of this? How can we get more of this, more of this? We don't want to be in a situation where it's just like, yeah, we're just flailing, it's super hard, it's not working. And so it's also important to calibrate, and that's one of the things a goal is good for, is you can calibrate, well, are we actually making progress towards this goal? And I think that's also part of what makes it fun and encouraging, is that you do have those moments of success. You do have, even though, yeah, it's usually like a lot of hardship and problem solving, like punctuated by short moments of, oh yeah, this is actually working out. But those moments are important. And so, which isn't to say, I mean, yeah, if you say like, well, it's not about the destination, it's about the person you become, that's basically true. But it's still important to like have a destination in mind and to check if you're making progress towards that goal.
Okay. So it is a truism. I guess that's what they call it, truism, right? It's like half-heartedly true. Okay. The other thing that's stuck out to me, and I have it written down in my notes as well. So on one of our team calls, you had mentioned the attitude that you have instilled in your Thrive Themes team, right? Which is be an opponent that never stops. And there's something very powerful about that, and also terrifying, right? It's like being a force of nature, right? Like this person, no matter what I do, is just going to keep on coming.
Yeah.
So where does that philosophy come from?
So I think it started with one of the Jim Collins books. I think it was probably Good to Great. It's one of so I read some of his books relatively early on in the history of like Thrive Themes, and they were pretty influential books for me. And so in one of his books, he talks about the 20-mile march as a core principle, right? The 20-mile march, which is the idea that like no matter the conditions, you're gonna march 20 miles every day, right? So if you're on an expedition, and he ties it in with this story of two teams trying to get to the South Pole and stuff, where one team was like well prepared and very consistent, and they made it back. The other team, basically, they all died, right? And he contrasts these two stories and ties that in with business, and it's pretty well written. It's kind of a riveting story as well. So, but that's where the idea of the 20-mile march comes from, because the team that made it there and back, what they did is that, on a day with really terrible weather, they would still, pack up their tents and so on, and they would still put in a march that was like roughly 20 miles and then camp again. And on a day with great weather, they wouldn't overextend. They would still put in about 20 miles and just feel a bit more rested and, get a bit more rest at the end of the day. Whereas the other team, they would be like hunkered down in their tents for several days waiting for the storm to pass. And then they try to make up for it by going hard on the better days, right? And it just shows that even though that intuitively kind of feels right, I'm going to hunker down when the conditions are bad, and then I'm going to make up for it on a good day. You just cannot catch up with the team who are doing consistent 20-mile marches. You just can't keep up with them. And so that's one origin of this idea. But another origin of this is actually also, we've already talked about martial arts. I was watching UFC fights at the time. I don't follow it that much anymore, but I was watching them at the time. And one of the fighters who I think inspired this idea was, what's his name? Like Carlos Condit, I think. Something like that. I don't know if he ever got a belt, but I know that he fought some of the top contenders. And one of the things about watching him fight was that he just keeps coming. And obviously he's not the only fighter like that, but he was just, that's where I got this impression. This guy just seemed like, even if in a 5-round fight and it's not looking good and he's just bleeding down his face and, and he's had some really hard rounds, he's just still coming at his opponent like with the same intensity as in round 1. And there's something really scary about that, right? There's something really scary about an opponent where, you feel like I've dragged this guy through the ring for the last 3 rounds, and I've been, battering him with everything I have, and he's just still, his setting is just, his dial is still set to 10, right? It's like, what is going on here? So that kind of inspired this because in a way, I think I orient myself by competition quite a lot. Because just like I say, I can trust the process that if I do this thing often enough, I will eventually succeed. I'm looking at competitors. And like I said before, I can see that there are competitors who do things, they make products that are no better than ours, and their marketing is no better than ours. So it tells me like, if we put in the work, we'll eventually catch up with them, or we can do what they did, And in a similar way, you can also think of it in reverse, right? We have competitors who are looking at us. And what kind of a company do I want to be? Or basically, what kind of a company would I not want to compete against? I would not want to compete against a company that just keeps going. And so we've always had this, we've always striven to be a company where it's just like clockwork. We bring out new features, we make our products just get better and better and better and better, and our marketing is on point, and we just keep producing awesome content after awesome content, and we just keep upping the game, and we just keep going, and we don't rest on our laurels, we just keep going. And so it's like, from the side of a competitor is like, okay, we start out, we're kind of in their rear view mirror. They're like, oh, here's some WordPress startup, I don't have to worry about them, right? But it's like slowly catching up. It's like, oh shit, we're now even with these guys. Well, I guess they're successful now, so they're going to rest on their laurels. No, they just keep going, right? It's like, that's the company you don't want to compete against. You'd much rather compete against a company that's run by some people who are like, oh yeah, we're going to hustle until we make some money, and then we're going to go party, We're going to take our business to here, and then once the money starts flowing, we're going to back off, or we're going to start getting lazy or something like that, That's much better to have that as a competitor than someone who just keeps coming. And so, that's where this idea came from. It's just like, let's be that company. Let's be that company in the space that essentially strikes fear into the hearts of our enemies because of how we conduct ourselves,
Wow. So before someone else, fills the job description of the competitor no one wants to compete with, let's just do it ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Unbelievable. Okay, you've mentioned a few things about martial arts, and just like in the little time I've known you, like you talked about Jackie Chan movies, The 13th Warrior, The 13th Warrior, The Last Airbender, The Book of Five Rings. So there's a clear pattern here, right? And I was curious to know, like, I know you're really into martial arts, but I don't know what is it that draws you to it. What about it excites you that much?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I got into it because as a kid, I discovered like martial arts movies and Jackie Chan movies and Bruce Lee movies, and Donnie and Jet Li, all the all the guys. I watched a lot of these Hong Kong flicks, and I was just super impressed. And I don't know, I was just really into that the idea that someone is, I don't know, has this capability, this kind of, because there's something about the way martial arts is displayed in those movies where it's just like this overall extreme athleticism, right? These guys can't only fight, they can also like run and climb and jump and backflip and all kinds of stuff, right? And so it's like, that's just so cool. The idea of, of building a body that's capable of all this. And I think it appealed to me also at a level of, it's something I started seeking out because I had a pretty bad time in school, and I was kind of one of the small, skinny, weak kids, and I got bullied a bit. It's nothing severe, but I was definitely at the bottom of the pecking order, And I did get into some fights with larger kids and stuff, and I think from that also was kind of the desire of, I want to be able to defend myself. I want to be able to fight, because there was an experience of lack there. I don't have this. I can't do this. And I guess that is part of an appeal. Like, the little kid who is at the bottom of the pecking order, like, sees these heroic figures do all this stuff. It's like, I want that, And so, I basically started training the first chance I got. And then it is also just like, I think I also just got into it in terms of there's something really enjoyable about the physicality of it. It's a good workout, and you're learning interesting things, and it's an interesting combination of like physical and mental skills, because it's a huge mental game as well. And so, I think that got me in. But also, I really like the warrior ethos that is displayed in generally like in popular culture, right? The idea, and as for example, Jackie Chan is really good at this in his movies, right? Where he's always a really nice guy who generally tries to avoid conflict, and he's the opposite of a bully, right? But he just happens to have these skills, and it's often also, especially in the older Hong Kong movies, it's often also implied that this hard martial arts training doesn't just make you a more capable fighter, it's also like character building. Like it makes you a better person. And there's something noble about building up your own power, because very often it's a conflict between someone who has the power and misuses it. And someone who has the power and bullies everyone and uses the power to basically tread on everyone else. And then the hero who stands up to that guy is someone who has the same level of power but doesn't use it against anyone. And he only steps up because this bully showed up, right? So there's something really noble about like saying, look, I'm going to pursue this hard path of training and discipline and so on in order to make myself so powerful, but I'm not going to use that power for personal gain. I'm only going to use that power to protect others, essentially. And that, to me, is like the ultimate warrior ethos, right? It's the warrior who makes himself a shield to be held up in front of other people. There's something super appealing about that to me. And that was like the thing that, I wanted to be that. I wanted to be that.
Wow. Thank you for that. Yeah, I remember we were talking about this last week as well in the team call. And you mentioned the same thing, like the appeal is like being the shield to allow people to be their best. Okay. So these are some questions I was thinking about when you were younger, right? And before you were successful, like, did you ever think that you'd be as successful as you ended up being? Did you?
No.
Did you used to daydream about it?
No, dude, no. I mean, it's when I was, so I grew up in Switzerland, and in Switzerland and I mentioned that because I feel like Switzerland doesn't have, in the culture, there's not a very strong entrepreneurial spirit. I think that, and obviously I can't really know because I only grew up in the one culture, right? So I don't really know how it is in other places. But I think that, for example, if you grow up in America, I think it's much more likely that maybe even as a kid you have a sense of, oh yeah, entrepreneurship is somehow cool, maybe I want to do that, In Switzerland, at least in my, as a kid, I never even considered that that's an option, basically. I don't know how old I was before I realized that, oh, you could start your own company, do your own thing, That was pretty late, basically, that I realized that was an option, And I think that, and also initially, I didn't really have a lot of confidence to do that because, like, in my life, apart from the martial arts, my life was a bit of a disaster, basically, because, like, academically, I was always kind of terrible, or actually, like, I always almost failed, right? I just about didn't fail through my way through school. So I never got the impression that I have the stuff that it would take to be successful, And I think in a way, like looking back, it's maybe almost good that when I got out of school, all I really wanted was to just work a job for a while and then maybe, save up some money and maybe travel a bit or something and then kind of figure out what to do with my life, But unfortunately, the job market was terrible when I got out of school. And yeah, I just had some of the worst temp jobs and never, no chance to save up money or travel, And so it almost forced my hand where it's like, well, this plan isn't going to work. And then I had to, that's when I started considering entrepreneurship. But yeah, I feel like it could have easily happened that, had I gotten out of school and gotten some relatively comfy job, I might have just stayed there, I might have just stayed there because I definitely didn't have that, like that drive or vision or anything like that. That all kind of happened later on.
This reminds me of something from Tony Robbins. The enemy of the great is the good.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
One way of looking at it. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that could have, like I said, that could have definitely happened. But like, if I had found a good job, then I don't know what would have happened to my life. Yeah.
You'd probably still be in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Enjoying your time. Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. So, well, I'm glad that didn't happen. I'm also sorry that you had a rough time, but I'm kind of glad you had a shitty life that translated into something amazing.
Well, it wasn't that bad, It wasn't that bad. I never lived out of a dumpster or anything like that. Like, I also want to make it clear because it's also it's such a trope, right? It's such a trope that that people will tell you their rags to riches story, Where it's like, oh my God, I used to be so poor and yeah, just terrible, right? Terrible circumstances. And I lived on the street when I was 5 and I almost froze to death and so on. And now I'm a millionaire. It's like, that story is so common. That story is so common. And I'm kind of reluctant to tell a similar story, but also I want to make it clear, like I never experienced like abject poverty or anything like that, which that's one of the great upsides of growing up in Switzerland is that we really have an excellent like social security system where, yeah, it's like no matter how hard you fail, like there's so many ways in which you're taken care of, and you really get many chances to kind of get your life back on track, right? So it's like, I think, because for sure you could say that I was poor in Switzerland because for a while I lived, the amount of money I earned would have been lower than the minimum wage because I only had temp jobs, and I could have gotten more money by just getting unemployment checks essentially. So I was kind of in that middle zone where I wasn't getting more money because I wasn't unemployed enough, but I wasn't employed enough to make minimum wage, right? And so that is essentially, I was living like in poverty. But in Switzerland, poverty is pretty good deal still, You're still eating, you have a roof over your head, everything's fine, So I want to be clear about that, right?
Kind of sounds like, if you want to go to jail in Finland. Because they have high-speed internet, with comfy beds.
Yeah, for sure.
So you experience just enough hard times to create the amazing story, but not enough to be crazy about it.
Yeah.
I like it. It's moderation.
Yeah, exactly. Poverty and moderation, yeah.
Okay, so one of the other things I was thinking about was like the person you are now, right? You're responsible for a large team. And I'm just curious, like I would imagine that having that or being that a fact of your life, it must affect you in some way. Do you find this to be, or are you even aware, or maybe that's the wrong way to ask, but are you aware that your actions are like impressionable, right? Like people look up to you. They're like, okay, so this guy, he does this, and this is how you are that leader figure now. So to be that guy, is it more restrictive or is it more freeing? Like that's something that thing that really I'm rambling a bit, but the way I was thinking about the quote. I think it's from Jay-Z. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. So I was thinking about, I'm like, yeah. So I was thinking about it. What's your take on that? How do you carry the weight of leadership, basically?
I'm aware of like responsibility, but mostly I don't suffer from it because I think we've set up our business in a way. And this is a really important thing for me, is that I feel very fortunate to have Paul as a founding partner and to generally be working with the people I work with, because we had some very similar values early on. And one of the important ones is like we lived very frugally, even as we started making, even as the business really became successful. We kept living very frugally, and we always had fairly large safety, like cash reserves, so that if something would go wrong, we wouldn't have to just immediately fire everyone. And so, COVID, the beginning of COVID was one of those things where we were like, okay, this could go really poorly. This could mean that we lose a lot of revenue, and it's not our fault, right? But we were in a situation where, okay, that sucks, but we also know that we could continue paying everyone for a pretty long period of time and figure out, how do we pivot? How do we handle this if such a crisis came in? It didn't happen. It didn't affect us that much. But still, right, we were in this situation where instead of it just being like, oh my God, something happened, we have to immediately start firing people and cutting salaries and doing all kinds of stuff. We are in a position where, the reason I'm saying this, I think that makes the position of leadership way less heavy, right? Because people's lives aren't so immediately on the line. And if you're living in a way where you say like, okay, I've got a fancy car and I'm living in a mansion and stuff, but the business is basically broke, right? So it's like we better keep making money. Then the responsibility weighs heavier because you're much closer to having to impact other people's lives negatively. And so that's an important thing that we, where we have a system in place that makes this less difficult. And then also we've also, and I think that's also because for sure, both me and Paul have had really bad jobs and we've had to deal with horrible bosses. And so another important value is like, let's not be like that, Let's make sure that we really treat people well. And one of the aspirations I've always had is, and I think this is true, I think that everyone who has ever worked for me has had a better job than the best job I've ever had, right? So if I can say, look, obviously, I can't be perfect. Nobody's perfect, right? And at times because of just price pressure, we haven't been able to pay people the best salaries. And so you can say, right? So someone can come to me and say, well, in my field, some people are getting paid a bit more, and whatever, it's a bit stressful. I can say, yeah, that's a valid concern, and I want to improve the way things are, but also I can say with confidence that the job you have, I would have killed for the job you have when I was your age, right? Every job I had was way worse than what you're going through right now. And that's important to me. I want it to be like that, right? Because I want to be able to say everyone who works for me has a good job, is being treated fairly, isn't just like treated as a cog in the machine. And so, again, I think this makes a business less profitable, but it makes leadership less toxic and less heavy, Like knowing that you're taking good care of your people, knowing that you're, like I said, not about to have to fire everybody and things like that, that makes it easier. So yeah, that's in that sense. And sometimes, of course, that is something that we worry about, and it is always super unpleasant when you have to let someone go. Which luckily hasn't happened very often in our business, but still, every once in a while, you get to the point with someone who's just like, this is not working out, and I have to let this person go, and that can be really difficult. It can be really difficult. Like, it's so unpleasant, and you like, because on the one hand, yeah, it's just an unpleasant thing to do, but on the other hand, it's also like, I hired this person, I like this person, I saw all this potential in this person, I don't want to fire them, right? And so those are moments where it does feel difficult, yeah. But the other thing you mentioned, like with, I don't know, how did you put it? Like being, I don't know, influential or being a role model or something. I mean, that's something I don't perceive that, that's not, I'm basically just, I'm not aware of that. And so that doesn't weigh on me at all.
Okay, so okay, fair enough. That was the reason I asked the question. Do you find it restrictive or is it more freeing? But if you're not consciously thinking of it at all times,
yeah,
I mean, it'd be pretty weird if you were.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely restrictive in a sense that I sometimes, my life could be a lot easier if I didn't work with so many other people, right? I often think that, and and ikario is an example of this, where, and we've talked about this as well, where for sure, like, I could have a much more comfortable life not doing ikario. It would be way more comfortable for me. And it's also a different situation than my earlier businesses, because I don't have to build this business in order to be able to pay the bills, right? It's like, I need ikario to succeed so that I can continue paying you guys, so that you guys can keep paying your bills, right? But for me, it's not necessary. And yeah, so I am in a situation where sometimes, like, man, this is really hard. This is really hard. And I'm an introvert, so I don't, like, naturally find it easy to work with people. And so sometimes I'm like, man, yeah, my life would be a lot easier if I wasn't doing this. But on the other hand, I think that is like the trade-off you make when you, in general, in groups, right? As soon as you do anything in a group, whether it's a business or anything else, in groups, you always have potential for friction. You always have, like, you have these group dynamics, and they can go both ways. So because of the group dynamics, you have worse times than you would have on your own. You have conflicts than you wouldn't have on your own, and so on. But you also have better times than you would have on your own, right? And so the flip side of everything I just said is that if I were indeed not doing ikario and I was just on my own, I would probably dream about doing ikario, right? And I'd probably be like, well, I should do something with my life that is kind of meaningful, I should probably do it with other people, because that's a cool thing to do, and I want to help other people to develop their skills and so on. And so, yeah, I think you just have to embrace that you have to take the good with the bad, essentially. At the end of the day, even though this is hard, it's about comfort. This is less comfortable than me just chilling on my own. But it's overall the thing I want to do, and it's overall much better for my life and my life quality, even though it's less comfortable.
Okay, that's amazing. And it's almost like what my notes say, because you just go to the next thing I want to talk to you about.
Seriously?
Yeah. Yeah, just for context, like I specifically asked Shane before the call, should I share the questions with you? And you're like, no, don't.
You're gonna
so
make
it's weird to me.
Got to make it natural. Well, but I think, maybe this is why, I guess we think along similar lines or something. I think maybe this is why our conversations tend to go like this, that we somehow, we're vibing on something here.
It's possible. Okay, so the next question I wanted to ask you, well, to be fair, the very first question I wanted to ask you, just as a joke, like, just to confirm, are you by chance a lizard person, or what's the Illuminati like?
You
Is it real?
I'm not nearly that powerful, dude. I'm not nearly. Nobody suspects that I'm part of the Illuminati, dude. I'm not.
Just making sure. I don't know what the criteria is to get in, like, so
Yeah.
just figure it out as. But yeah, with ikario, what is your primary motivation now? Like, what drives you? Because when you just described all that, right, it sounds like it's a lot more discomfort than it is, at least in the time being,
Yeah.
than it is worth. Like, is the squeeze worth the juice right now?
Yeah, for sure.
That's a quick shout out to Ollie.
Yeah, it's an Ollieism. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's worth it because, well, for me, that the reason I started ikario is essentially that I basically want to help people live a better life, right? That's the simplest way to put it. I want to help people live a better life, and I want to help people experience the kind of transformation I experienced, right? Because I come from a place of a lot of like internal suffering, a lot of self-inflicted suffering, where a lack of awareness and let's say like injuries to my self-image put me in a place where I was really suffering, right? Where I felt like a failure, and I felt worthless, and I felt directionless, and so on and so forth. Like this kind of suffering, because that's the other thing. Like before, I was talking about how in Switzerland, even when you're poor, you're still kind of rich, right? Well, but the other side is like no matter where in the world you are, if you're depressed, if you're suffering because you've been made to believe that you're a failure, if you're kind of drifting around directionless in life, that suffering is the same. It does not matter whether you live in a nice apartment or not at the time, right? So that kind of suffering, I felt the full brunt of, and that is something that I've just, for me, it was like such a revelation to discover how much agency I have here, and how much I can upgrade my self-awareness, and how many tools there are to deal with these things that were such huge obstacles, such huge sources of suffering in my life, right? I've just learned so many ways in which to deal with that. And that is something I just feel like the best thing I can do with my life is to pay that forward. I want other people to experience this too. And it's also something where I have gotten the impression, just it's kind of organically happened, right? I've gotten the impression that this is something I can bring people, because even without really trying to do this, I've become, I don't know, I've had interactions with people where I feel like, wow, I can really, someone comes to me with some life situation, some problem or something, and I can really lift them out of this, or I can help them lift themselves out of this, in a really significant way, where I can see that happen. And that makes me go, well, I want to do more of that. That's amazing. I want to do more of that. In a way, you could also think of like, I want to be the person in other people's life that I would have needed when I was younger, right? I could have really used someone to kind of come in and say, hey, first of all, you're not as bad as you think you are. And here's some stuff you've never considered that you can actually do to upgrade your mind, to upgrade your life, to get what you want, to all this kind of stuff, right? And to just basically to get out of this misery and to get to a point of incredible like empowerment. Because like one of the questions you asked, about did I envision being an entrepreneur and so on. Not only did I not envision being an entrepreneur, my wildest dreams of how good life could be were not nearly as good as my life has been. It's like I didn't think that would be an option for me, that I could, like travel the world for years and years and meet all the amazing people I've met. Like that's another thing, I used to be such a loner and stuff. And I used to think that I'm kind of just consigned to being, the introverted loner, who has no friends. I have the most amazing friends now. It's like I know so many amazing people that I love hanging out with and learning from and stuff, Like so in so many areas, my life has just gotten amazing. And I want to pay this forward. Like I want to see other people experience this kind of thing. That is that is my main motivation. And it's also one of those things where I already have seen this work, you know. We've already seen this work within this team. We've already seen this work with the students we've had in the focus and action classes. Like, we can see, like, people come in and, like, just look at how upgraded they are, right? Look at how upgraded their capability is, and how much better they feel after they learn a couple of relatively simple things from us, right? And for me, it's just like, I want to spread that to as many people as possible. And this is the thing I would like to get really good at. Again, if we bring this back to skills, you know, I think of this as, I would like to get extremely good at, like, helping people upgrade their lives. And yeah, that's what motivates me. Like, I can't imagine anything. I can't imagine, you know, kind of looking back from the deathbed, I can't imagine anything that I could be doing with my life that would be better than that would be more important than that for me to do, you know?
That's amazing. Yeah, and you're so right. Like, you know, we have started helping people kind of, it's almost like you're helping them unlock their potential.
Yeah.
I don't think this is anything you can give someone. You can
Yeah.
kind of show them that, oh, you didn't even know you're capable of this.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if I can talk about a specific person, but he is one of our testimonials in Focus and Action.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Can I say? Okay. His name is Anthony. I won't say his last name, but he was from Australia. I hope he's listening. But I remember because in his, like, final call with me, he was saying that it's like, oh, like, I've made like 30 videos in 30 days plus blog posts. He was doing Challenge 44. And he laughed at himself. He's like, my initial goal was to do 2 a week. Mm-hmm. He didn't know what he was truly capable of. And by the end of it, he was like, why am I not doing better? I'm like, man, like, do you see how far you've come?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The difference that can be made in someone's life is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, okay. So, okay. What else did I want to ask you? Yeah, I wanted to ask you what motivates you to do what you're doing right now, but you've already answered that. I guess in closing, I just have one more question. Or actually 2 questions, just on the topic of helping people kind of unleash their potential type of thing.
Yeah.
So in doing my research on procrastination, one of the things I was reading up on was fixed mindset versus growth mindsets.
Yeah.
So is this a limitation that you think someone can overcome?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Fixed mind.
Yeah, for sure. And the reason I'm so sure about it is, well, first of all, I've experienced this myself, for sure, in many areas of my life. I came very much from a fixed mindset, right? I had, and just to define the terms really quick. So this is, I believe, Carol Dweck's work, where a fixed mindset is someone thinking, I'm just the way I am and I can't change it. And that can be thinking, I just suck at this and I can't change it. It can also be like, oh, I have great talent at this and I can't change it and I don't have to practice, right? That's a fixed mindset. And a growth mindset is thinking, no, it's not innate. It's like, if I put in the work, I can get better at the things that I work on. And so I definitely came from a fixed mindset. Very much I felt like, well, I'm just, why am I always bad? Why do I always get bad grades in school? Well, I guess I'm just kind of stupid and I'm slow and I have trouble learning, and that's just how it is. I can't do anything about it. And I, even with martial arts, initially it was like, oh, this is something I'm good at, and I felt like with this I just have talent here or something, But really, it's just like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I was super into martial arts. I practiced like crazy, and of course I got good. And because school was constantly demotivating, and I also had some terrible teachers and stuff, it's like, yeah, I did have the experience sometimes, even if I did put in more work, it didn't seem to help. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy on that side as well, right? And so I have myself come out of that fixed mindset in many areas of life. But I've also seen it in others. And in fact, that's one of the things with, again, with Paul, my business partner, who initially when we started working together, he was very much stuck in a fixed mindset about his abilities and about his chances of success. And he has told me this, specifically, that he was like, at some point, he was just like, well, okay, I'm just going to give this a try, It's almost like I don't really believe in it yet, but I'm just going to give this a try and start doing like some self-development style work, start working on myself, maybe do some journaling, read some of these books. Even though he was just like, I don't really believe this. I don't think this applies to me, but I'll try it out, right? And then eventually over time, that completely transformed for him as well. So I've kind of watched someone lift themselves out of a fixed mindset in loads of areas of life. So yeah, that's definitely something you can control.
Okay, so it's not a barrier for anyone.
No, it's just one of the things you need to work on, right? And I really like the saying here, like the obstacle to your task is your task. So, look, if you have a growth mindset and you want to do something great, you can start doing the thing, right? If you have a fixed mindset and that's preventing you from doing the thing, well, then you have to fix your fixed mindset first. It's just you have one task before the, before the next one, essentially.
Right. Okay. Just to illustrate, I guess, the comparison now. So when you don't have to say the exact thing, but let's say, certain task, you used to have a fixed mindset about it. Mm-hmm. Now you have a growth mindset about it. So to illustrate the difference, what is that growth mindset thinking now? What's that process like, the thinking process?
Yeah, it's just about it's essentially trusting yourself. Trusting that I can do this. So if you think about, and it can be anything basically, right? But if you think about, I want to start a business. If you have a fixed mindset, you're probably not going to do it. Or what you're going to think is, well, I'll give this a try, right? I have an idea for a business. I'm going to put it out there. And then if it doesn't succeed, I'm just going to give up and walk away, because it means that my idea wasn't perfect and it didn't succeed, and I don't have what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur, right? That's it. With a fixed mindset, it's like binary. I'm either going to succeed or I'm going to fail, and all I can do is I can find out. But if I find out that I fail, there's nothing I can do to change that, right? And with a growth mindset, you go, okay, but more likely with a fixed mindset, what you do is you think, well, I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I'm not disciplined enough. I'm not whatever. So I'm not even going to try. That's most commonly what people with a fixed mindset do, right? So you will tell yourself all kinds of elaborate reasons why you can't start a business. And with a growth mindset, you go, okay, starting a business is very difficult, but I can probably figure out how to do it, right? Other people who are not unlike me have figured it out before me, and I can read books about it, and I can create something and put it out there and see what happens. And I, get some kind of feedback. Even if the feedback is, no, this doesn't work, I can learn from that. And I can say, okay, well, the next thing I do is going to be different. And I'm going to, again, everything we talked about really, I'm going to improve my skills. I'm going to learn, I'm going to practice, and I'm eventually going to get better. But internally, I think that the thing that matters is like trust, right? I trust that I can do the work to get the result.
Okay. I liked everything you said there, except the last statement went in a different direction. You took it towards trust, because as you were talking, the way I was perceiving it was there is a belief that you can do this, right? And I guess that belief is synonymous to the trust as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely part of it. Like you believe that it's possible, and I actually love in terms of strategic thinking, right? I mean, one of the questions you can ask yourself at the beginning of a project is like, basically, what are the possible outcomes, or what is the range of possible outcomes? And is the thing I'm trying to achieve, is it possible, right? If you just ask that question is it possible? In other words, right, if you ran the simulation of our universe millions of times, is this a situation where no matter how often you run the simulation, the thing I'm trying to do is never going to happen? Or is it a situation where this is one of the possible outcomes, right? And so if I say, okay, I want to, again, with the genetic limitation, right? If I want to become an NBA star, it's like, that's probably not possible, to be honest, right? It's probably no matter what I do, even if I got to run the simulation 1 million times, I probably never end up in the NBA. Okay, so maybe I shouldn't try that, right? But if the goal is I want to build this business, and again, you can kind of look at competitors, and you could say, okay, other people with no more budget than me and no more whatever than me have managed to build such a business. Clearly, this is a possible outcome. And so that's where the belief, well, do you believe it? Well, it almost becomes, it's not a question of belief. Like, as a matter of fact, the thing I'm trying to do is a possible outcome. And then it's my job to find the path that leads to that specific outcome, right? So, and this is also true. Like, we've talked a lot about business in this call, but this is also true in other contexts. Like, if I want to run a marathon, and just for the record, I'm a really bad runner, right? If I want to run a marathon, I can look at that and say, well, is it possible? And then I can see, yeah, loads of people manage to train themselves up to running a marathon. And there's been people who ran the marathon barefoot, and there's been like 80-year-old ladies who run a marathon and so on, right? I can see, look, there's no way that me running a marathon is impossible. It might be really difficult for me, but it's certainly not impossible. If I want to run a sub 2-hour marathon, I can probably like look at the physics of my body and be like, nah, this is not going to happen. No matter what, that is outside of the range of possible outcomes. And so this is basically how I think about this. It's not so much about, I guess I don't think in terms of belief in the sense of, believe in yourself with like rising music in the background. Like, I don't think about that. I think about it in terms of, is it possible or not? Like, it's much more, I don't know, I guess it's less exciting, but that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And the thing that comes to mind, it's almost, maybe I'm drawing the wrong insight here, but it's kind of like you're discouraging the pursuit of the superstar game.
Yeah.
Okay, but would it not be, I guess, okay, I was going to ask if a possibility exists that you could be a superstar.
Yeah.
It probably does, but is there like 0.01?
Well, I feel like if you have superstar potential, you probably find out relatively early. Although, again, like in some games, if we think of all the different things you can do as a human being as different games, right? In some games, there's a lot of luck involved. So, for example, there's I can't remember which actor, but so for example, I think there's stories like this about several actors. I'm not sure if they're all true, but like the idea that someone, maybe in their 40s, drives their friend to an audition, and the casting agent is like, "Can you read for this line?" And then they get the job and they become a superstar, right? It's like pure luck, basically. So there, it's like, again, there's a factor there. I don't even know. How do you even find out if you have that potential? I have no idea. But for a lot of superstar games, it's like you would find out pretty early if you have the potential or not. It's like if you're ever going to drive for the F1, then you're going to be sitting in a go-kart at age 5. And if you're not sitting in a go-kart at age 5, it's just probably not going to happen, right? And in many other areas, I think it's similar. It's like if you have the superstar potential, you'd probably be on that path and know about it pretty early on. And for someone like me, it doesn't seem worthwhile to look for that, And what comes to mind, one of the guys I used to train with, so I had like my own training group for a while, and one of the guys, he was like, I think it was like 16 or 17 at the time. And this dude had been he discovered like exercise and just like working out at around 16. And he just went from this skinny kid to being built like the Terminator in a span of a few months. Okay. And this guy, and for sure, he was also broke as hell. So for sure he wasn't juicing. This guy was not taking anything illicit. This guy just absolutely prime stock genetics, right? Just in no time at all. He was the strongest guy in our group. He was absolutely massive. It's like, and he was, you try to wrestle this guy, right? And he was just like built like a tree trunk. It was just bizarre, And it was like, and at the time, I guess he was about, I don't know, 6-7 years younger than me, so like in terms of physical development, I was way ahead of him, but he was just unbelievable, right? And this guy basically built a better physique than I will ever have doing some push-ups and pull-ups, right? Because he couldn't afford a gym membership. Now, and that's the kind of thing I mean, like this guy probably has superstar potential, and he ended up being in a bobsled team or something, It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, that is a clear signal. If by the third time you go to the gym, you're the strongest guy in the gym, that's a signal that maybe you have superstar potential, And yeah, so for me, it's like, look, if you're in your mid-20s, then if you're not already like well on the way, then don't play a superstar game.
Right. And I think it's important to point out that, like, from one way of looking at it, from one perspective, it can seem like this podcast right now is about don't go after your dreams. Like, no, not at all. What you're actually doing is you're expanding people's horizons. You're saying that this is not the only thing that you can go after to be successful in, right?
Yeah.
There's so many things you could do.
Yeah. Well, and think about, like, because look, superstar games are super limited as well. And it's just, we're aware of them because of how huge they are in our culture. But what I'm not saying you can't be world class. You can be world class amazing at a non-superstar game. And that includes, by the way, something like, like financial success. Like you can be incredibly financially successful going the long way, which is to say you don't build a business that has a $20 billion exit, in 2 years or something like that, right? Like the unicorn dream, right? You don't do that. No, you build a business that starts generating a decent amount of income. You start investing. You start, you manage. You're strategically really smart with your money. And over the span of your lifetime, you can become absolutely incredibly wealthy. So, and that's the thing, right? It's like, if your goal, what I'm basically saying is, like, if your goal, and I'm just using this as a yardstick because it's easy to imagine, right? It's like huge amounts of wealth. If that's your goal, what I'm saying is, don't try to get there the superstar route, because if you try the superstar route, you're almost certainly going to fail. And instead, take the 20-mile march route, right? Take the long and steady route, where your chances of succeeding are so much greater. That's basically what I'm trying to encourage people to do. And even with something like, look, I gave the example again, let's just keep using the same examples of pursuing martial arts as a career. And like I said, I don't think there would have ever been a chance for me to be a top contender as a competitive martial artist. But if I wanted to, I could probably become a world-class coach, right? If I said, okay, I'm going to use my skills and specialize on, like, I'm going to become, because I can become a technically excellent martial artist, and I can get really good at and build this deep skill and knowledge of how to train martial arts. But I don't have the genetics to be a top contender. But I can build the skill that will make the top contenders want to train with me. I can do that. That's not a superstar game. So that's where I want to steer people. This is not about not pursuing excellence. This is about not throwing away your time pursuing things that you're not going to succeed at.
Wow. Yeah, so I guess one way to summarize would be consistency over luck. Like, choose a thing that you can control, right? And embrace the storm. Mm-hmm. Realize that when you look back, you're probably going to be smiling at it one day on the other side of Skype, shooting a podcast. Be like, oh man, those were the days.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, all in all, I think that's probably the best way that I could sum it up as. Be consistent, don't rely on luck, and be strategic about how you're pursuing your goals.
Yeah, exactly. A strategic, I think, is the important thing, right? If you combine that consistent effort with strategy, then the sky's the limit. That's probably the most concise way to sum it up. Yeah.
There you go.
All right.
You just gave us a secret to success. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this, Abby. This is good fun as always.